Look at that. Look at that, buddy. There is a mule deer. Look, he's trying to get me. Look at that. Now that, thank you, partner.
Nice job.
Thank you a ton, Lindsay. I tell you, we have worked and worked trying to get close enough to one of these big beasts for a muzzle loader shot. That thing shoots pretty good. But, man, a 5, I guess. He ain't the biggest buck in the world, but I tell you what, he's my first ever with a muzzle loader, and that makes him pretty darn special.
Good looking deer.
I couldn't be happier, really. Wait till Wacky sees this, eh? That's what you get for having to go to town to get provisions. You miss out on all the fun.
I know it. Buddy, it's been a great trip. I gotta thank you on behalf of Bob and myself. Make sure you tell Holly and Glenn and everybody how much we appreciate it. Especially Lindsay there. We had a great time.
All right. Been a pleasure having you.
That's the way to finish it, ain't it? Montana. Gotta love it.
If I was going to spend my last day thinking about that long drive home, I wanted to try one more time to find that monster. After several hours of careful glassing, Tim found a buck laying underneath a limestone overhang. It was impossible to tell just how good he was, but we decided he was good enough, and Roger and I immediately set out trying to make the big loop that would bring us down right over top of this buck, if we were lucky. Once again, we were in the predator mode. We were creeping down the rock, hoping we made no sound that would alert this buck, and so far, we heard nothing below us that indicated he had any idea we were coming. This is the chess match, folks. This is the way it's played. A foot here, an inch there. Wait, hope he doesn't hear you. Pray you make the right move and the right guess as to which way to go. This is intense. You look it up in the dictionary, you'll see this picture. Finally, we were out of rock, and I was right there staring straight down on that velvet monster buck. I was confident I could make the shot through that little hole in the rock. Oh, I missed! The arrow skipped off the face of the rock and hit in the dirt right between his legs. Terror immediately replaces confidence. Now I've got 9 thumbs and they're all on my left hand. The buck has run out there about 25-30 yards. He stopped. He doesn't know what happened, but he's certainly not going to stay around long. Only seconds remain in my chance for redemption.
Oh, he missed him. No, he got him that time. He got him. He's down.
Well, as I float down off this mountain, you watch it again in slow motion. The blades of the broadhead skipped off the rock and took that arrow out. It actually pushed hair on the outside edge of his chest and landed right between his legs. The second shot, however, as he turned to face me, took him dead in the chest, and he only ran 15 or 20 yards before he piled up. That's what bow hunting's about, my friends. You go from anticipation to adulation, to terror, to failure, to redemption. It is the entire emotional spectrum, and anybody can have it.
Let me put this down. We'll help hold him up. He's too heavy.
My friends, this is what hunting is to me. It is the excitement and the thrill of stalking mule deer with a stick and a string in the eye of the dragon. We turned and looked over there, and there was a dandy bull elk not 100 yards away, folks. I have no idea how he got there. We just sat silent and watched him feed for a minute, trying to figure out which way he was going to go. And when it became clear that he was headed the other way, Tim gave one cow call, and it snapped his attention. He lowered his antlers and started coming straight at us, and I'm telling you, my blood pressure just about knocked my head off. Folks, elk truly are magnificent beasts, and at any distance you can tell that this is a regal member of the deer family. But close up, with a weapon of harvest in your hand, it's a whole nother deal. Here is the object, as I've said it before, of your obsession. And this elk, while he wasn't coming straight in, was obviously interested. He seemed a little bit nervous, a little hinky. He'd take a few steps and then he'd stop and he'd switch and look back and forth. I didn't know what was holding him up, but I promise you, I was saying prayers at light speed trying to drag him in just a few more yards for a responsible shot. Another soft cow call, and he came a little closer. Folks, this was so intense, I promise you I was sweating out the backside of my earlobes. It was amazing. I just needed about 10 more yards. And then this elk, for some reason, started getting real antsy. He'd pace back and forth, look down the field toward the cow and the calf he came in with, and then look off across the other direction. I don't know what he was seeing or hearing. I couldn't see anything but deer and antelope, but something was bothering this bull. He was starting to move off, but a couple of soft cow calls had stopped him. I tell you what, folks, this was going from perfect to perfect disaster. I looked back over there, and he was running out of the field. Something had this elk spooked, and that something was the kahuna. There he was, coming in the other end of the field, coming in behind us. All that younger bull had to do was look over there and see this big boy coming into the field, and he was out of there. Like some sultan of the black timber, his harem preceded him into that hayfield. And folks, it was quite a view to see all those cows and calves, all those elk moving across in front of us, the antelope in the background, the setting sun. It was absolutely breathtaking. And then to see the big boy come stiff-legged strutting into the field, this was better than we'd hoped. We had just lost out on a chance at a magnificent bull, but an even better one, the one we were trying to coax in when it was snowing and nasty, was walking right into our front pocket. Well, Tim gave a little half-hearted bugle, trying to imitate that smaller bull, and we immediately had that big boy's attention. I tell you, this is kind of like a chess match. You don't know whether to call a lot or call a little, cow call, bugle. It's always a gamble. But when you're playing with a big boy that's got this many cows with him, you can bet you're going to be in for a fight. You know that old saw about a bird in the hand being worth two in the bush? Well, believe me, in the elk world, 25 cows and calves are a hard thing to walk away from for a fight in the bush and maybe one more cow. Still, that's what we were trying to do. We were trying to coax this bull into shooting range, get him to leave his cows and come over so we could take a poke at him. This is extremely difficult, folks. It almost never works, but here we are. That's the hand we're dealt, and that's the hand you got to play. It is absolutely exciting. It's just muscle-trembling tension, but the reality of what we're trying to do goes against everything in nature. Another half bugle produces little more than another glassy-eyed stare. It's obvious that this big boy isn't afraid of that little bull. It's getting dark fast, so Tim and I decide we might as well all out push him, pressure him as hard as we can. A couple of deep-throaty bugles, and Tim takes up whacking the brush behind me with an elk shed. If he's going to be challenged, this is how it's going to be done. We're going to have to convince this bull that he's in danger of losing his harem. Now this is tricky stuff too, because he could just as easily round up his cows and run them out of this field and keep right on running till he's on the top of the next mountain. You don't know. What we're hoping is that we're in close enough proximity to start enticing some of his cows away, and if that happens, then he will get jealous or mad or whatever elk get and charge us. This is kind of a dicey deal, but this is exactly what I came for. This level of excitement is what makes elk hunting, in my mind, one of the greatest things you can ever try, and when you add a stick and string to that, it makes it possibly the greatest. Believe it or not, it was starting to work. This big boy was starting to stiff leg stalk up to us. Folks, I'm telling you, the pressure and the excitement is off the Richter scale. A couple of more bugles and slaps of an antler on the brush behind us, and this big old bull starts ripping up chunks of turf with his antlers. This is a challenge. This is what's known as a Donnybrook. If you want to see a fight, you mix it up with a trophy bull elk. Folks, you want to feel intense? Put yourself in my place. You got Tim behind you ripping the brush. You got a giant bull elk tearing up the ground in front of you, grunting and snot blowing out of his nose. This was everything I had hoped it'd be and 100% more. I mean, Tim is bugling, the bull is grunting. I'm sitting there trying to figure out at what pulse rate your heart just bursts. You can't believe how much fun this is. This is something, if you've never tried it, no matter how hard I try to explain it to you, you can feel it. I just hope you get some sense of what I was going through. It's getting dark. I'm starting to think, man, we're going to run out of light. The bull is still there. Tim is working his butt off. He's running up and down this tree with a shed, just tearing branches. Making this much noise, you think it'd scare away everything in the world. All it did was tick this big boy off. It was our last day to elk hunt. It was the last 10 minutes of shooting light. It was getting too dark to videotape. Tim was still ripping the brush up and down, and all this bull would do is stop and stare and then snort and grunt. I tell you folks, it was exciting, but I was beginning to panic. As a last-ditch effort, I decided I was going to put my bow across my head and crawl out into the field toward this bull's cows. Now, I don't know if I've ever seen this done before, and I don't suggest you try it unless you're real confident with your ability to react and shoot. Tim was convinced that I was going to get stomped by this elk. All I could think of was if I could entice him to come a little closer to check me out, then I could finally get a shot. Folks, elk hunting is just that exciting, and crawling out in front of a mad bull elk with a bow on your head might not seem like a real smart thing to do, but at the time, it was all I could think of. Well, darkness closed us out, and all that bull did was walk over and tend his cows and sort of shuffle them away. This was the end of 9 of the best days I've ever spent. But folks, I'm here to tell you, I came back from Montana with some of the greatest memories. I saw some of the neatest stuff. We saw great trophies. We saw all sorts of deer, great whitetails. We saw huge record book antelope right up in our face. We had mule deer looking down on us from 20 feet in the air. We saw things that you just can't see anywhere else, and we saw tons of them. The memories that it burned into my mind and the desire it lit in my heart. I don't know how you measure your time of field. I don't know what you value. But as for me, I can honestly tell you, to see a buck topping out a ridge in the setting sun, to see a great trophy trotting across the river bottom, it isn't all about what you harvest. It's about what you experience. It's about what you live, and ultimately what you touch. When you see a huge mule deer buck walk right up in your face and you decide, I'm gonna pass that one, it's as big an accomplishment as when you see that one and say, that's the one I want to take. To be sure, we left Montana with some great trophies. Be it the turkey that we snuck up on from a half a mile away, or the great buck that I was able to harvest in his bed. That's the best mule deer I've ever taken. Folks, everywhere you look, there is something memorable. There is something new. And being from the east, not having the chance, if you've never sat in the mountains and looked out across the heavens, you truly are cheating yourself. This is the stuff that wilderness journal type memories are ultimately made of. And when you stack on top of that a bull elk at 100 yards ripping the ground up and blowing snot and grunting and bugling, when you see a great bull standing there in the fading sunlight staring you down, folks, the only way I can tell you is that'll just have to be the one that got away. But it won't ever get away from my memory, and I promise you, I'll be going back.